Today we're going to discuss in more detail the role and goal of a research question, as well as review how to create one. This is intended to jumpstart your research proposal project. Throughout our class, we're going to be covering a number of topics concerning the qualitative research process. We will cover our reflexivity and stances in philosophy of science. We will review the ethics of research and describe ideas of rigor and credibility. We're going to be learning how and when to use a variety of data generation methods. But we're going to start first exploring the process of research design, specifically focused on research topics and questions. There are many ways that we can think about qualitative research designs. Ultimately, they are planned for generating and analyzing data to answer main questions. In qualitative research, we do not typically begin with hypotheses, but questions and curiosities. Oftentimes, we are led by our theoretical interest, and once we have our questions drafted our methodological commitments. However, throughout the whole process of design, generation, and analysis, we stay open to new ideas within a focused and disciplined process, which means our research designs, as well as our questions, are tentative. This is because we continue to grow and learn what is important to the focus of the study as we study it. If we think about research design as a map and the ways in which we can view a map from many angles, being able to choose different paths to get to one destination, or if we think of it like a Google map, how if we're driving in Google Maps might update based on road conditions, different traffic blockages, and it'll reroute us. This is similar to the way we think about qualitative research design. So there are also many components that go into our designs, and today we're going to be really discussing topics, purposes, and questions. Let's start with the research topic. These address the personal, practical, intellectual, and critical goals that drive us forward. So personally, what motivates you as a scholar? Practically, what is it that you hope to accomplish? Intellectually, what are the insights that you hope to gain? And critically, what power do you want to deconstruct? Topics are ultimately meant to focus your inquiry and are aligned with your beliefs about meaningful knowledge and how we know. Let's look at one of my recent papers for an example. In this paper, I became really interested in the phenomenon of disinformation in the news about critical race theory and how it was intersecting within all of these different sectors of our daily lives. I had been looking through Amazon reviews of different critical race theory texts, and I noticed that suddenly there was this real increased sort of vitriolic attacks against critical race theory for certain books, and none of them seemed actually based in having read the books. So my initial curiosity was based on these ideas of where are people learning about about critical race theory and why are they coming to Amazon to critique books that it was clear they hadn't read. And so to further develop my interest, I had been reading a news report about the number of times that Fox News had mentioned critical race theory as compared to the number of protests across the country. So to further kind of think through this, I began to observe Fox News channels, or the channel, to sort of watch who and what was talking about critical race theory, how it was described, and any of the authors and texts that were described as critical race oriented. So then I went back to that website that was tracking all of the critical race theory protests, and I further read up on critical race theory as well as the concerns that the parents and the legislator were having when they were initiating these types of protests. So that's how I got to my general idea of what the topic could be. But then when you are trying to actually write your topic, for the purposes of this class and your first assignment, we want to think about the research topic as a brief statement that funnels from your broadest to most specific area of interest. Within this topic, anything that you will address in your research questions should be discussed in this topic. For example, if I were to want to study the experiences of international students with disabilities in predominantly white institutions, each of these topics should be described, talking about international students with disabilities, and then the idea of a predominantly white institution. So everything should be addressed within my topic statement. So looking back at my example of the critical race theory and Amazon review text, For me, I always find it helpful to write my topic in bullet points from the broadest to most specific. So if we return to this example, I was interested in Amazon reviews. That was sort of what initially sparked my interest and how they transmit disinformation. But I couldn't start there. I had to think about who was writing these reviews: people, citizens, community members. So I need to understand who those people are and what their concerns are. But then I can't also stop there. I need to consider where are they getting their information. So I move up a level to think about the ways that politicians and media outlets are spreading disinformation. So if we think about this in the reverse, I funnel down in writing my topic statement from the broadest, the politicians and media, to sort of that mid-level, which would be the community members that are protesting, to the very specific people leaving Amazon reviews in what appeared to be a form of protest. In this class, you're going to be writing a research topic statement. It should include 3 to 4 paragraphs that you'll bring in existing literature and discuss the significance of a problem. One thing to note is simply writing that something has not been studied or that it's underexplored does not make a compelling case that it should be explored. It might be underexplored because it's not an important problem. Instead, you need to make us see why your interest is important. However, I really only want 3 to 4 paragraphs because I don't need a full literature review. I need just something that shows what all of the elements that are going to go into this study, and you should be able to address that in 3 to 4 paragraphs. Let's move into the research purpose. This is really the why that drives your study forward. So you started out with your topic statement, which is funneling down, right, from the broadest to the mid-level to the more specific. And then the purpose statement really becomes, so what? Why do we funnel down? What are we funneling into? It should be about 1 to 2 sentences, but definitely no more than a short paragraph. And you should include the central phenomenon or the concept that you're studying. You should use qualitative research words, such as explore, understand, discover. You want to note the participants, if there are any, which there should be because you're doing qualitative research. And if you are using some sort of research site, so if you're going to a specific school or classroom or Amazon, you want to state that within the purpose as well. So I like to use this template as just a place to start. It's sort of like for those of you who remember Mad Libs, and there might still be Mad Libs, I don't know. This is just something where you can kind of plug and play and see how it is to write this purpose statement. And this is really all that you need. So for the worked example that we're talking about, I wrote the purpose of this critical race content analysis is to describe the process of protest through disinformation by book reviewers on Amazon.com. So the site, Amazon, book reviewers, the participants, disinformation and protest, focus, describe, qualitative term, critical race content analysis methodology. So for this first project that you're going to be writing, your draft of your proposal statement, I don't expect you to know your methodology. You can just write the purpose of this qualitative study and then go into the rest of it, which I do want you to say. Do you want to explore? Do you want to describe? Do you want to illustrate? Do you want to illuminate? And so really don't worry too much about your methodology unless you happen to know what you're interested in. So moving down our funnel, we've gone from the broadest to the most specific to the very specific of our study. We then are going to be focusing in on research questions. Now, I believe that writing a really good research question is one of the hardest parts of the design process. A research question is generally the question that you write that your whole research project is set out to answer. They suggest the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's, and how's of the study, and should be the most direct way to focus in your purpose derived from your topic. In qualitative research questions typically focus on social processes, social meaning, significance of context, different cultures. And they're essential because they ultimately help you to focus in your research process by providing a path through the research and writing. It guides our research, providing a backbone to the study, and they should answer meaningful everyday questions addressing gaps in literature, and we're often guided by theory. Everything in a study should be to answer a question, and we can talk about this further because also our questions change over time. So you really want to be concise and clear within your project and your research questions. So these, you want them to somewhat be broad, but you also need them to be narrow enough that they can be answered thoroughly. They should ask questions that make sense for the discipline that you're studying in. You do want to not ask for subjective value judgments such as good, bad, or better. You do want it to also be complex and arguable, so it can't be answered with a yes or no and can't be answered with easily found facts. You basically want to be able to provide scope for debate within your research process. Some people follow the finer method, which prompts researchers to determine whether one has the means and interest to conduct the study. It also asks one to consider the ethical ramifications and relevancy of the research. You want to think about if your questions are feasible and specific. So are they answerable within the practical constraints that you have, such as time, resources, the population that you can work with? You don't want to particularly ask for conclusive action policy or course of action because you want to stay open and broad. You also want to be relevant and original, addressing a problem relevant to the discipline, but that it can really contribute back to differing original ideas and has not already been answered, or maybe it's been answered from a slightly different lens. So if we think of research questions as serving to narrow the purpose of our research, there are two types that we follow. Our overarching questions, which is the most general questions that you could ask. It's sort of like saying, what's going on here? How is the phenomenon or concept understood or perceived? Then some people do sub-questions, and these divide central questions into more specific topical areas of interest. So how is what's going on experienced by, and you narrow by the participants, the site. How do varying participants' perceptions, understandings of the phenomenon or concept inform their practices, processes, and any sub-concepts? When writing our research questions, we want to begin with words such as how, what, in what ways. You tell the reader what you're attempting to, using qualitative words, discover, generate, explore, identify, or describe. You ask what's happening if you're interested in developing descriptions. You ask what was the meaning to people of what happened to understand your results. Ask what happened over time in exploring process. So we also want to avoid more quantitatively driven words such as relate, influence, impact, affect, cause, mediate, or bias. Remember, we're trying to ask questions that our participants can answer. So we also avoid asking more than one question at a time. For example, how do participants experience transformation and self-awareness in a qualitative research class? This is essentially asking two different things. A person might feel transformed, but might not have developed the self-awareness to understand that, or vice versa. And so we'd want to break those into two questions, and really they might be more sub-questions. It could be that we have an overarching questions of what is the experience of students within a qualitative research class, and in what ways does qualitative research engage transformation, or in what ways does self-awareness emerge during the process of learning? So we can ask, those would be more breaking down the interest of the phenomenon of learning qualitative research. You also want to avoid asking close-ended questions, such as, do the participants think the program is effective? So some things to think in mind as you're starting to practice writing your research questions is that you want to make sure they're aligned with your purpose. And this also goes back to whatever is in your research question, be sure that you've described it in your topic statement. You want to remain open-ended, that if you're using a theoretical perspective, that it remains aligned with that theoretical perspective. You want to make sure that you've asked research questions and not interview questions. You make sure that the questions reflect what the potential participants can provide. And are the questions simple yet sharp in their focus? And does each question pursue one line of inquiry or more? So if you have more, that means that you're asking more than one question. So here's some examples from the project that we've been discussing. How is whiteness reproduced in Amazon reviews? How is disinformation shared with readers of Amazon reviews? And through what discursive strategies do reviewers attempt to sway Amazon readers? So when we talk about how the topic statement needs to reflect, or the research questions need to reflect what has been covered in the topic statement, this means that within that 3 to 4 paragraph description, I need to first define and describe whiteness, how whiteness is reproduced socially. I need to talk about disinformation. I need to talk about why Amazon is important. And then I need to describe what a discursive strategy is. So I'm basically setting it up so that the reader can see this clear path from beginning to end. So let's just quickly take a look at an example of how we can potentially evaluate a research question as we write it. So if I were just to write, how does the aftermath of divorce affect people? This is a pretty bad question. It's very broad. We're not clear what people we're interested in. We're not clear on who the potential participants could be that could answer this question. Also, the term aftermath is really pretty negative, as implying that divorce is always bad. So then we move into one that's a bit more intentional. What effect does divorce have on children? So here we have taken out the negative aspects. A divorce can be both really good for children as well as somewhat challenging. And so children all experience these transitions differently. But we're still not clear on what kind of children, what age group, where are these children, where are we going to find these children, and who are the participants? Are we going to ask children? Are we going to be talking to teachers? Are we going to be talking to parents? Are we going to talk to adult children of parents that divorced when they were younger? We then moving into even better, how does divorce influence children's social development? And so here again, we haven't identified who the participants are that are going to be able to talk about this influence. And then the best one of these options is, according to K through 5 teachers, what effects do they observe in children whose parents are divorcing on their social engagement? So it's kind of awkwardly worded. But so we're asking teachers who are observing children in classroom situations to tell us, who have been identified as children whose parents are divorcing, to tell us what they notice about how they engage socially. And this could be with their peers, with other teachers, and just sort of getting that sort of more, so it's broad, but it's also quite refined. So that's it for this little discussion on research questions. I look forward to seeing what y'all come up with.